I'm glad I don't have to do all the things you do. I wouldn't be able to pull it off. Too much ADHD in my universe.
Welcome to How Did We Get Here, the podcast where each week our two talking heads, being myself, Jess Bost,
and Mark Newfield,
bring on guests to learn more about their past 5 jobs before landing where they are today.
Because, as you know, life is super simple, straightforward, and never makes people ask, wait, you did what?
Join us for an honest convo on career exploration, overcoming setbacks, considering when to pivot, and offering encouragement on how to find value in your career and life choices.
And with that, let's ask the question.
Holy crap,
how did I get here?
Together. And we are back. Today we chatted with Dave. Dave Ross. He is not a financial advisor, so a little bit of a different spin on our conversation today. He's a financial professional who started off in asset management and equity research. And really just through the evolution of his career, we saw and heard how he just took some seriously bold moves and made changes. And just, I appreciated the career path and the navigation and the conversations that we had about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different conversation. I mean, he went from aspiring to be a pro basketball player, although that blew up, I think, in middle school. Then he was an investment banker, then he was an equity analyst. Now he's a trucking company executive and also an artist. But when you look at it, it was a different kind of conversation. We didn't follow his really life or career path directly. What I came to see was the mix of luck and hustle that we've seen out of lots of successful people.
Yeah.
Dave definitely experienced both. But what it comes down to is he sensed that he had a calling, and that's not analytical. You'll find he's super analytical. That was not analytical. That was in his gut, and it was just really interesting to follow that and listen to it.
Well, it's an interesting word choice because there's an implication of the external, and that something outside of you is calling. Technically, I guess it could be something inside of you calling, to hear. But the idea is, if you don't know, what's the signal to get you to understand? And so it's kind of in a search. You're kind of like, what am I doing? Where am I going? What should I be doing? And should is a word that I've been trying to eliminate a little bit more from my vocabulary recently.
Yeah, I loved that part. I loved the way that he framed it because, for him, and I think for most people out there, the calling piece is something that they can feel very strongly inside of them or not. And he was certainly on the side of, I did not know what my calling was. I just knew that I had something important to do in the world. And so, it wasn't a magical epiphany. He just really leaned in and figured it out. To your point of kind of some hustle there, some grit, some determination to figure out what his calling was. And I appreciated that depth of the conversation around what it takes to figure things out when you're not sure about it from the start.
Yeah, I'm going to take it a different way. Other people I had known had their own internal sense of knowing as to what they but what they wanted to do. It seemed to fit them.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's people who always knew they wanted to be a teacher, always knew they wanted to be a doctor, always knew they wanted to play in a band. And they had this feeling, knowing from age 8. And that's what they did. And then they were, into it and happy and generally successful. And, I thought that there was something missing if I didn't know what that was, because I had seen other people have that connection to purpose, that seemed to be defined for them. For me, it was undefined.
Yeah.
And one of the learnings I've had in recent years was that's not a bad thing. In some ways, it's freeing, because when I looked at the landscape, there's a lot of things I could do. There's a lot of things that could be interesting. that I could be successful at, not just one thing.
Very true. I mean, there was some combination of intelligence, analytical skill, grit, listening to others. He talks about his mentors, and I'm not sure that was a formal structure. They were just people that he learned to talk to and, who wanted to see him succeed. And if you go back about 15 or 20 years, there was this whole notion of, you need to figure out what it is you really love and chase that and, put together a life plan to get that. I don't know about you, but the more I look at myself at 22 and talk to other 22-year-olds, who the hell knows that kind of stuff at that age? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Sometimes 30, 40, 50 before you
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
And who in the hell decided that that's the way to do it? I mean, with Dave, we see one path. We've seen others from other folks, and I mean, we're going to be talking about, Perth in another couple of weeks, and again another even path.
Yeah.
There's no right one.
And then you run into the issue of choice.
Yes.
And yeah, I had this, I don't know if it was a fear or focus on always having the right answer. So in that sense, when you talk about career or purpose, okay, there's 4 jobs in front of you. They all could be good options. They all could, set you up to do something that you like to do and pay the bills. And there was never a clear, this is the one, the shining light on top of one of the options, or a strong pull towards one. Which that's what I was hoping, is somebody else would make that choice,
Yeah.
for me, or that calling that
Yeah.
we talked about would clearly show, which door do I choose?
The
Yeah,
light comes down over the right
yeah,
choice.
to walk through, because I was afraid that if I chose the wrong one,
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. It was so refreshing to see how he navigated his career, and to your point, like you said, he didn't put all the pressure on himself to choose the one right path.
He did not, and I would say to any of you out there that are struggling with, what is my calling? Do I have a calling? What's the path I need to take? I think Dave is a good argument that you go explore some things, and eventually you run into a piece of luck. There's no glowing neon sign like the one in Beetlejuice Juice pointing down here, telling you this is the way to go. Reality is not necessarily glamorous.
Yeah.
From a lot of perspectives, and this has been my personal philosophy for a long time, you just need to keep putting one foot in front of the other one.
Yeah.
It's not glamorous.
either it wouldn't be as good as it could be, I would have regrets, I would leave something behind that, man, if I had just taken door A, it would have been so much better, but I took door C. I should have known. How could I not have known? And so I had this, maybe that was just being rewarded for getting good grades growing up. And, if you had the right answer, then you got good grades and you got attention and praise. And so even something like this, it could apply to. It wasn't until much, much later when I was going through a career transition that I had the epiphany that there's not just one right answer. The positive part is that there could be more than one right answer. So it's like, no matter if you choose door number 1, 2, or 3, if they're all the best option, or if they're all great options, because you're always worried that one option is better than another. Or, going back to like the game show thing, you open up door number 1, it's $1,000, and you're like, okay, that's cool. But door number 2 was a car, and door number 3 was, $10,000, and you had more than you did before, but it wasn't as good.
Yeah, no glowing signs in finance, no neon signs, if you're looking for that in your career choice. But I liked how he used the approach of multiple right answers, and we talked a little bit about the doors that we could walk through, and all of them being correct, none of them being a wrong choice. And I think that was especially helpful for him when he made that big switch into investment banking.
So I just took, well, basically the reason I went the investment banking route was to take a good basically take a good paying job that looked good on the resume. So that gave me more options, because I said, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know where I want to go, but these investment banks are offering a pretty good paycheck. You go there, it's a nice stamp on the resume. I do that for a couple years and I would have some money in the bank, and I could kind of, at that point, look at the options again and try to figure out where to go. So really it was more of a stepping stone rather than a decision that this is the right path.
My observation is this. You tell me if it lands with you. There's two sides to this coin of I have personal choice here. One is if I choose the right path and this works out really great for me, then I did a good job figuring out what the right door was. And the flip side of that is if I get down this path and realize, crap, this wasn't the best fit for me. I don't really want to be here, that maybe there was a better choice out there. I also am responsible for that decision that got me here.
Yeah, and then out of that into equity analytics. I mean, was equally successful there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really admire about Dave is he owns who he is.
Mm.
I don't know if we're gonna play the clip about 2020 and how he kind of shifted during COVID,
Yeah.
but he owned all of that. And it was just like, this is the way I'm going to do it. And I'm accountable for that. And if it worked out, great. If not, that's the choice he made. I would argue that that's a level of accountability that many people shy away from. They want to point fingers at others. You know, he owned all of it and he was okay with failure. It's more important to him to own it.
Yes. It's more of a fear of making the wrong choice than than trying to make the right choice.
And that fear builds into a reality for people that they've built a narrative that they've built for themselves of, it's my fault that I'm here. These were my choices that got me to this point.
Which is actually true. But that's 100% true all of the time. The question is how you frame it. It is your fault no matter what choice you make. But if the choice isn't something that you like, you have the opportunity to change it. And now you know what you don't like. And so I've had a significant reframe in that in recent years, because it is very much in perception and how you frame what is happening and your role in it. And also how much you really understand about what's going on. And if you begin, from the concept of it being a kind of benevolent world universe, out there, and that you are somehow supported and guided, and you figure out, when things come up, when you're frustrated, when things don't go as you thought they might go, which also it's very difficult to beat yourself up over not knowing how things were going to how things are going to unfold or happen. Yeah, the Yogi Berra quote goes, making predictions is hard, especially about the future. And this idea that you should have known is often a problem of the mind, because we're very good at backwards rationalization. We're very poor at knowing what's going to happen down the road. Part of the reason is you think about all of the moving pieces that you would have to get right and how they interact together, to put together some kind of accurate picture, which is literally impossible. You could have a sense, you could look at things, and if you think things are going to happen like the past, they might unfold like the past, because that's what you're thinking. That's your expectation. If you expect that, things are going to unfold to your benefit, things will likely unfold to your benefit. And so the reframe, trying to silence that self-critic as much as possible, go with the flow a little bit more, and trying to figure out all of the choices where you need to course correct, where you don't. But the idea is we need to keep moving forward anyway, and that as long as you're constantly monitoring how you feel, how you show up, what you like to do, what the opportunities are, that you're going to end up in a better place.
Yeah, that's the thing. He wasn't just making decisions to, to your point, he was owning the consequences too. No finger pointing at other people for influencing his career path. No, blame it on the market. I didn't end up where I wanted to be, or I didn't choose the right investment. Just some really solid character and integrity pieces that he has had and carried with him through that process.
For sure. And it's, interesting to go back through. I mean, he knew he had some artistic talent way back when he was a child, but he never really pursued that as a calling
Yeah.
until he got to this place. And even with all his mentors and obviously people that trusted him and that he trusted, he hired an executive coach. Now,
Hmm.
that's not for everyone, but for him, I think being a super analytical person, that's a smart move. You know, he just is like, I'm a smart person, I'm analytical, but nonetheless, he didn't go it alone.
Both, they're tied together because what you do is takes up a lot of your day, and that ties into your person and what you're doing. So yeah, because I was in a good situation at Stiefel, and again, I liked what I was doing, and there was no rush to leave. I was able to take the time and think about this when I wasn't working, and I hired an executive coach, and he helped me think through things, talk through things, make lists about other options. Because other people, have plenty of opinions if you ask them, what you should do, uh, but ultimately nobody knows you, and they all have their own experiences. So for me, it was important to talk to as many people as I can and get as many of those different viewpoints, because one of the other things is you don't see everything. You do see just from from your perspective, and people on the outside may have a different view of you, and for certain things may have a better view of you than you do, um, of yourself. And so, I had conversations with a lot of mentors of mine that I spent time with over the years, whether they were people I used to work with or for, CEOs, chairmen of public and private companies that I dealt with for a long time, that all had different career paths and interesting trajectories. Would just simply ask them, what do you think, knowing me for a long time, somebody with my skill set, what would be a good next step in my career, or what can I do? What do you think I should do? What do you think is a really good area for me to go into? Then you get a lot of different answers.
Yeah. And when we talked about that, I could totally relate to his biggest takeaway from that whole process.
And so then I had to learn, okay, well, there's a lot of
Yeah.
options people are proposing. What does that actually mean? And that involves a couple steps. One of the steps is, even before looking at those, having your own personal list of uh, what you want, what you don't want, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember
what's a
talking about that.
non-starter. Um, and you can
Yeah.
start that by reflecting
Yeah.
on what
That
you
non-starter
currently do.
list is super important.
And that,
Yeah.
yeah. So, because generally if you're in a job and you're thinking about going and doing something else, or switching careers, um, you probably don't hate everything about your current job. So it's like, okay, what do you really like of what you do? It could be a short list. It could be a long list. And what do you not like? Like, and if you had to show up and do something else next week, what do you absolutely
Yeah. Yeah.
not want to ever do again that you're doing right now? And
Yep.
what do you make sure that I need that to be a part of it? And so you come up with these lists, and that'll, do you want to interact with people or not? Do you want to be in an office or not? Do you want travel? How much travel? Um, yeah. And then things like, what your daily schedule looks like. How early do you have to be up? How late do you get home? How many breaks do you have? How many hours a week do you work? Do you work 7 days a week? Do you get weekends off? Is it flexible? Is it not flexible? In the current environment, can you work remote or can you not work remote? And then where do you want to live? Some jobs require you to relocate. Where's your family? Where are your friends? Some people don't mind jumping around. Some people are very rooted to a certain area. For me, one of the reasons I live here in Miami is because I don't want to do winter again. I don't want to do ice and snow. So I don't care how good of a job it is. I'm not doing it in Minneapolis or
Yeah.
Maine or Canada or something along those lines. Um, and you get all of this together, and then you go research the different options.
For sure. And just a lot of good habits that he developed. And I don't know how he developed them. We didn't explore that, but I mean, he was journaling and
Hmm.
he had a whole routine there. I mean, he
Hmm.
deliberately reflected on things. I mean, that's never going to hurt any. Oh, well, you can overthink things for sure. Some of the anxiety prone of us can go do that.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, reflecting on, in a healthy way, he just, he wasn't winging it. And by the way, you can be successful winging it. Plenty of people are. But for him, it wasn't the right path. And he knew that.
But you need to start with your own criteria that is specific to you and that you take into looking at every different option, no matter what field it's in. And then you learn about it. Okay, what is involved in working at a hedge fund? What is involved at having a corporate development job for a big company? What is involved in working at a PE firm? What does the day-to-day look like? What does the monthly travel look like? Who are you working with? How big is the team? How big is the company?
Hmm.
You get some general answers across those, but then even within
Right.
the different opportunities, everyone is different. Because one private equity firm's lifestyle could be completely different than another's. One might require you to travel 80% of the time. Another might require almost no travel. Some have big teams, some have small teams. Some you have more freedom, or more decision-making ability, and others you're always subordinate to somebody else. So you have to look at, really everything that comes along. And, I had a journaling process where I would refine my criteria through, and this took me about a year and a half. 2020 happened in the middle of this. So that was very good for me because it actually allowed more time to think and reflect on this than I would have had if I was in the normal cadence of traveling a lot for work and doing what I was doing. But 2020 was a wonderful year. Um, it allowed me to pause.
Yeah, I know, right? I got to say, when he started talking about you mentioned this earlier, how he handled 2020. There was certainly a part of me that was like, wait a minute, that was not my experience at all. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little jealous of his reflections on that time period, but it still was a very, I think, a helpful perspective on what it could be and what moments of stress and time periods like that where your entire world shifts on you, you're being handed a new normal. The way that he navigated that time is certainly something that even though it wasn't my experience, I respect it a lot, and I respected the way that he talked about how he approached that.
Think about things. I mean, and that's one of the ways I viewed that time period. I called it kind of like the great pause. Some people had very different experiences. I wasn't on social media. I don't have a TV. I had an art studio, so I would paint. I would hang out with friends that wanted to hang out. Uh, I would read. I would think about what I was going to do next. I would journal about it. I would still do my normal job. And it was a very productive year, a very, very productive year. And I came out of it with a better developed sense of what the next opportunity would look like. Even though I didn't have it down to one answer, I didn't have it down to one company, I didn't have it down to, I need to do this here with these people. And a funny thing happens when you do that, and when you get clarity, and a lot of times in the journaling, is that things show up. Um, and I started getting offers.
Oh, talk about making lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
I mean, he 100% did that. and he narrowed his community down, and
Mhm.
they, took an approach that clearly worked. I mean, as far as I can tell, nobody. I'm not meaning to make a joke here. Nobody died in his community,
Yeah.
but they were able to maintain a community and do some interesting things and push forward. And I remember telling my wife in 2020, we don't know the innovations and growth that will come out of this event,
Mm,
but they're happening.
mhm,
And Dave, I think it showed a way to get through it without making everybody around you sick and still grow. And of course,
mhm.
now we have like this technology that you and I are on today, the massive use of Zoom and related, whichever tool you use. I'll call out Jason Pereira and maybe we can get a really funny comment on Teams out of this. But in any case, how he handled that was amazing. And he, it's an old fashioned statement, but he for sure made lemonade during that time period.
The people have always been important. In all my job choices, even, choice of college, for me, it's always been about the people. That's the sense of connection that you allude to. You don't want to be on an island. You want to be somewhere where you fit in, and where you fit in, you can shine a little bit brighter. Um, and this is the number one advice I give high school students looking for colleges, or college seniors looking for jobs. There's a lot of names that may look good on the resume, uh, but you are not going to show up as your best self, and you're not going to succeed and thrive at all of them. You need to figure out, kind of that Venn diagram, what's best for you. And I've often turned down, more money, more prestige, from the external point of view, to stay in a place that I really enjoy the people.
Yeah, that was certainly a huge takeaway from our conversation. And it's not about the job title or the salary. It, what One of the things that we came back to in our conversation that I appreciated was that it's about the people that you surround yourself with. And part of making lemonade out of lemons, to use that analogy, or that saying, is taking what's being given to you in this circumstance, which is an opportunity to spend time with people, and being sure that the people that you are spending your time with are the kind of people um, that are going to influence and surround you with the things that you are about and the things that you are after. So just reflecting yourself in that community and making sure you're being careful as you choose that. And I think that's going to hit home for a lot of folks who are listening.
I think that's just so important, because if you feel comfortable around the people you're working with, you are going to show up a better version of yourself. And if you pick them right, they're going to make you into a better version of yourself in a way that you want to be.
In a way that you want to
Um,
be. Yeah.
if you think about your mentors and bosses through the years, you it's important, if there's somebody that you really respect and admire, it's important that you work for them, because you're going to end up being more like them.
Mm,
And if you don't respect and admire, and fundamentally like the person you're working for, it's not going to work out well, because you are going to become more like them, and you are not going to like it. So the balance issue is an interesting one, because there's daily balance, weekly balance, quarterly balance, yearly balance. And it's very hard for somebody to measure balance
mhm,
on a day-to-day basis. Because sometimes you need to look at it more from a big picture perspective. You might have to really, be all in on this one thing. It could be personal health. It could be your work. It could be, traveling a lot, and that could last for a week where you don't have the other elements, in there.
mhm.
But if you zoom out and you look over, okay, well, over the month, was able to exercise enough? Did I get enough sleep? Did I, put in the time I needed to at work?
Yeah.
Was I able to read and spend time with the dog, or hang out with friends, like whatever it is? it's very difficult to have all of that, every day.
Yeah.
And so when I think about it now, I try to, zoom out and consistently evaluate and make course corrections along the way. Um, but in your 20s or in my 20s, there was no sense of this. I mean, the only sense I had was a very, what I would just call immature, sense of work hard and play hard.
Hmm.
It was, okay, I'm going to work my ass off during the day because I've got a good job and that's what they make you do. And that's kind of what you do in your 20s, and essentially an indentured servant for a while. And, but as soon as I'm out of the door, I'm going to go out to the bars. I'm going to meet up with people. I'm go to sporting events, and go to concerts, hang out, and then and get whatever sleep I can, and then rinse and repeat. And just kind of, it was work or it was play. There was no or very little time for personal reflections
Mm.
at that moment. I mean, really, it wasn't until I was about 30 that I kind of had that uh, shake up to say, hey, what else is there? If I press pause on these other two things that were just running on autopilot, which was kind of the work scene and the social scene, the work scene and the social scene, the work
One
scene.
feeds the other. Yeah.
And you realize that you're not directing it; you're kind of just caught up in it. And so I said, well, if I want to be able to direct this,
Mm.
what do I have to do? And so I started getting more involved in the community. I did a lot of volunteering in Baltimore City, mainly around youth education. Um, met a lot of different people than those I had been hanging out with. Spent less time, out in the traditional kind of, party scene, hangout scene, and more time in the community scene, volunteer scene, more tame settings with friends and family, and still worked and um, did all that, but was always thinking, kind of how else, can I be doing this? And really for the last, I would say, 14 years, um, a lot of personal reflection, a lot of trying to figure out, okay, is what I'm doing now best for me? Because ultimately, what's best for me is best for everybody else. You mentioned earlier about making the impact. I think that we make the best impact if we can get out of our own way and figure out what is best for us, because what we enjoy doing and where we become most alive is the most impactful thing for everybody else.
Yeah.
It's that energy that you bring every day.
Yeah.
If you show up and you've got a smile on your face and you're excited about whatever you're doing, whether it's putting together a PowerPoint presentation, for some investors, or whether it's, showing off some of your paintings, um, or talking to somebody about how they should restructure their nonprofit organization. Like, there's a lot of different things you could be doing. And if you show up with a sense that that's where you're supposed to be, um, that's where you want to be, and you're excited about it, then you're going to do a better job at what you're doing. Other people around you are going to do a better job of what they're doing. And it can be more fun.
It is certainly true. He is living proof of you are who you hang out with.
Hmm.
I mean, his current role as a chief strategy officer in a transportation company was not something he was looking for.
Hmm.
One of the folks that he knew and talked to regularly made that offer.
Yeah.
And that's how he got there.
Yep.
And so, again, he just kept putting one foot forward, talking to people, and here he is on the next phase, working artist, transportation company executive. And I would say, Dave, thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah.
I think your journey, it ought to hit home with many listeners. But if you're wrestling with big life decisions, there's a methodology in here that, I mean, you could write a book on as to how to make, decisions when you have many options,
Yeah.
and you want to push forward, you just don't know where. So thanks, Dave, for making the time to talk to us today. It was really fabulous.
Yeah. All right, Mark, shall we get into it?
Absolutely.
All
Let's
right, let's
roll.
do it. Uh, so two things that seems like they stood out for me when I was kind of comparing notes with the things that stood out for you. It seemed like they both rose to the top, and those were: one, keep a good circle. That was a direct quote from Dave in our conversation, and then the other was have a process. And we just saw that in the unfolding of his story and in the way that he told his approach to some of these big career decisions and life decisions. And so I think those things go hand in hand when someone's also looking at their financial success and how to build wealth. And so I want to put that out there and ask, one, would you agree that that translates over to financial success and the process of building wealth? And then two, what do you see about that circle of building financial success? Um, and I'm gonna, if you've got things that you're writing about, just what is it? Are those things that stood out for you? And then, how do you build? What does that look like? What's your financial circle whenever you're trying to just really pare it down to the things that are going to be most meaningful for building wealth?
Well, it's hard to disagree with keep a good circle and have a process.
Yeah.
B, Dave is almost like a living example of, I'll take an analogy, the seven habits, Stephen
Okay.
Covey's
Yeah.
book. Not that he was expressing those seven habits. It was more like, you want to push forward and figure out your calling. Here's a process
Here's a process.
that you
Yeah.
could follow, especially if you're a really analytical person.
Mm,
And the keep a good circle piece is nothing other than, I'm going to rephrase it into, you are who you associate with,
mm,
which is, and I mean, you're a fitness professional too. You are what you eat,
mm-hmm.
and as far as readings and things like that, I mean, Phil Pearlman wrote a piece on 4 simple things you can do, to be a healthy person. And coincidentally, I've been working on a piece for months around what I call the laws of financial health. They're not complicated, but that doesn't mean let me phrase this positively. There is a lot of work in executing those things well.
Fair. Yeah.
And Dave did the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And more
Exactly.
than anything, right? I mean, if you want to, go to Bill Belichick in football, he had a very famous phrase: "Do your job." He did his job for himself, not
Right.
for others.
Yeah.
And here he is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be happy knowing who they are, living a life they choose to live, recognizing their talents. That's where Dave is.
Yeah.
It's super impressive.
Yeah.
And he could have kept cranking as an equity analyst. I mean, it was Stiefel. He was doing extremely well. He's probably very highly compensated. He even says, I could have coasted through that, but he didn't.
But he didn't.
He did his job on himself.
Yes. And that was one of the things that stuck out to me in the conversation too. There was a moment where he was talking about how he, enjoyed his work and then also enjoyed his time off work. And the cultivation of what that looked like over the years, like in his 20s, enjoying his time off work looked different than when he was in his 30s versus, and
That was
so
the funny part, but very true.
yeah, yeah. So I think that also makes space for, your the actual specifics of your process can change as your life makes more or less space for these things that help reflect back to you who you are and what it takes to be successful or to feel like you are putting your best out into the world. And then another thing that Dave said was he believes that the best version of you, being your best, is also what's best for other people.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was a
that ties,
super powerful statement.
yeah, ties back to, and I'll let you talk about it for a minute. It just ties back to what does it look like to build out this circle, and even when you're thinking about your financial health and building wealth, you know, that understanding of being your best self is what's best for those around you in that circle.
And so when you think about the basics, right? The basics are first and foremost understanding who you are and like what your triggers are.
Hmm.
This is one of the things I believe I've learned over time is you're not going to get rid of a lot of your triggers.
Hmm.
That's who you are.
Hmm.
The key is understanding that that is who you are and that is how you're going to react and what are you going to do about it.
Hmm.
And so my basics in this business are mostly behavioral. I mean, I'm looking at my bookshelf here. Um, I have Brian Portnoy's book, The Geometry of Wealth. I mean, we talk about Brian and Shaping Wealth a lot, and there's a reason for it because I think that philosophy matters and the way you think about it matters. I have The Psychology of Money. I mean, I think that's a given. I have Jason Zweig's Your Money in Your Brain. I have Daniel Crosby's The Behavioral Investor. I have Lisa Feldman Barrett's 7.5 Lessons on the Brain. I mean, there's more stuff back here. I just finished Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish, which might be the best book on how to think clearly I've ever seen. I think I read more than most people. So I think the basics are really and truly understanding who you are,
Hmm.
understanding your money story, realizing you're going to react to certain things. Like, hopefully, my wife won't get too excited about this, but there were some financial things that happened when she was growing up. And she, to this day, has a hard time believing that we're not going to run out.
Yeah.
And there are small expenditures. Like, she will shop for months to find a skirt on Amazon or Carl's Golfland. Not a plug for either one, just saying, so she can get a skirt for $30.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just who she is. That's her money story.
Yeah.
And mine is very different. I'm like, I want that. I'm going to go buy it.
Yeah. But to your point, like, because, not everybody is a reader. Not everybody digests information as a reader.
That is also true.
And so you don't have to be a reader to be financially successful.
No.
But if you are a reader and that is your way of digesting information and organizing and
very good
creating
point.
processes, then you need to read finance books. Like that
Right.
needs to be a part of your circle. But that doesn't have to be something that you should do in order to be financially successful. You don't have to read financial books in order to be financially successful. And
No,
then,
but you do need to understand yourself and your own behaviors.
yes,
And I think there are some fundamentals, as there are fundamental physical things, right? Get a little movement, sleep well, eat right,
digest information. Find a way to digest information and other perspectives.
And on the financial side, it's actually not that complicated. Spend less than you make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you spend less than you make, and by that I mean you're actually saving money to save, because there are two forms of savings too.
Mm-hmm.
There are savings to spend and savings to save. And my mother never had any savings to save.
Yeah.
And that's a
But you don't have
brutal
to
way to
have
live.
you don't have to have an Excel sheet for that, but you can.
No.
If you are someone who likes Excel sheets, if that's a way that organizes information for you,
Right.
you absolutely can utilize that. But it doesn't mean that everyone should utilize that.
No, but
Another
you need
one,
to understand what your spending pattern is
yeah,
and what you need to save to get to where you want to go. And if the simple answer is you take every paycheck, however you get paid, whether it's a big K-1 distribution once a year or a W-2, and carve off some money and put it somewhere where it's some work to get it back,
yep,
right? And let that money work for you in whatever strategy you want to have out there.
that's right.
If you consistently spend less than you make and you consistently save and invest, the reality is you'll probably end up okay. Now, how okay you end up is a function of where I'm going to advocate as a professional financial planner that you need a plan of some sort.
You do, yes.
Because I mean, if you're spending a penny less than you earn every pay period, that's not going to be sufficient.
Yeah.
Unless you have a wonderful pension somewhere, which some people do, but that's rare. So anyway, it all gets back to these fundamentals of, financially spend less than you make.
Mm-hmm.
Save automatically, invest automatically, let it work, never interrupt compounding. These are not complex things, but boy, are they hard to execute behaviorally and emotionally, because if they weren't, you and I wouldn't have jobs.
Well, and they're hard to execute because they are dependent on who you are as a person. And so there is a lot of exploration that is helpful to the process of defining what will work for you. And I think that's where a financial planner, similar to a business coach or, but specifically with regards to your finances, it's where a planner, I think, can excel for someone is
Mhm.
to reflect back to them. You seem like someone who might work well with this type of strategy or this type of plan.
That's a
And
good
this is
point.
the way that we organize those plans in that, for someone like you. And, because again, there are people who are very financially successful who use credit cards. And
Mhm.
there are very people who are very unsuccessful who use credit cards. And so credit cards aren't the problem here.
Right. It's the behavior.
It's not a should use credit cards or shouldn't use credit cards. It's a
Right.
who are you? Are you capable of utilizing a credit card as part of your plan of being financially healthy and building wealth?
Yeah, and it's
And
funny, and there's the opposite too, right? I mean,
yeah,
my wife and I have a very good friend who is very financially successful, retired successfully in his early 50s. Lives a good life, enjoys his life, is not just, sitting around. Um, Pays for virtually everything in cash.
yeah,
And he always has a huge wad of cash, which drives my wife crazy because she's like, why does he carry all that cash? He pays for cash. He pays everything in cash.
everything
That's
in
what he does.
cash.
My wife never carries cash. That's just her style.
Yeah,
And this works for her.
yeah,
And I'm somewhat in between. I'm like to have a fairly decent amount, but I don't carry the massive wad that my buddy carries.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's massive to me. To him, that might not even be massive. He might think he doesn't carry enough. There
yeah.
is no right answer
There's no
here
right
other
answer.
than your discipline and knowing yourself.
Yeah. And that knowing yourself piece is such a huge and critical part of building that circle, building that process. One of the things, just back to the conversation with Dave, that I felt like he did a really great job of is despite the fact that he didn't really know his calling from childhood, he knew who he was, which is a
Hmm.
version of calling, right?
Yeah.
And because he knew who he was and he paid attention to that, even if he wasn't really clear on that in the youthful years, he was deliberate and intentional about journaling that, about making space to reflect on that, about caring for that. And because of his intention there, he's been able to navigate these career paths and create a life of financial health because he paid attention to who he was. So even though he didn't know exactly the way and didn't know exactly what was next, just the fact that he was very careful to know himself gave him enough information that when the right opportunity presented itself, he knew that's a good fit. And I think there's just a lot of wisdom and a lot of overlap and carryover for that with finances. Like even if you don't know what the right decision is with your finances, knowing who you are is always a good filtering process for figuring out that next step with your finances.
And that young lady might be the ultimate simple, basic thing.
Young lady, I'll take it.
Hey man, I got decades and decades of experience here.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for this conversation. Dave, one more thank you and shout out to you for joining us and sharing your journey and your learnings with us and giving us some color for this conversation that Mark and I are having. Thank you all to our listeners. I hope to see you back next time.
My pleasure. And to you and all those folks who got hammered by this storm that, went up the kind of
Thank you. Yeah.
center east of our country. We're all trying to figure out ways to help you all. And we're ignoring all the noise in the environment. So thanks, Dave. Here's good luck to all of you who need it. And we're off to the next convo.
A
big thanks to our amazing guests who agreed to join us on a journey through their career stories on How Did We Get Here?
If you've enjoyed the laughs, surprises, and unexpected turns, be sure to hit subscribe for more intriguing tales.
Your support means the world to us.
Until the next episode, keep asking, keep exploring, and keep wondering.
How did we get here? This podcast is not intended as and may not be considered to be investment advice and does not constitute a recommendation of any investment strategy or product for a particular investor. The information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy or sell the investments mentioned. Investors should consult a financial professional before making any investment decisions. The opinions are those of the host and interviewees at the time of the podcast recording and are subject to change. These comments should not be construed as recommendations, but as an illustration of broader themes. Forward-looking statements are not guarantees of future results. They involve risks, uncertainties, and assumptions. There can be no assurance that actual results will not differ materially from expectations. Investments involve varying degrees of risks, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or strategy will be suitable or profitable for our client's portfolio. All investment strategies can result in profit or loss. Just Boss is an investment advisor representative of Wealth Tech Partners, LLC, DBA, Lake Avenue Financial, which is a registered investment advisor and only conducts business in jurisdictions where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Mark Newfield is an investment advisor representative of Journey Strategic Wealth, which is a registered investment advisor and only conducts business in jurisdictions where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. The firm is not engaged in the practice of law or accounting. You should always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation.